Hello, this is James Tanner. Welcome to the Genealogy Star video blog. You can read my blog posts on Google Blogger, or you can view some of them here on my YouTube channel. You can also try a search for Genealogy Star. About 10 years ago, I began trying to distill the essence of genealogical research into some basic rules. I had discovered that much of the pain and suffering in the genealogical world is caused by researchers ignoring some basic rules, and after discovering the first and most important rule, I kept thinking, and the first list of the 6 rules of genealogy was published on my Genealogy Star blog back on July 1st, 2014. Since then, I have published 8 more rules for a total of 14. When the entire genealogical world seems to be against you finding your ancestors, just remember these rules and you'll soon be on your way to finding that elusive ancestor. This video is the first in a series where I will cover all of the 14 rules, each one in its own short video. This video is about the first rule of genealogy. Rule number 1 is, when the baby was born, the mother was there. This rule seems too obvious, but I can't tell you how many times it has been entirely disregarded. You will immediately recognize the first corollary. The father does not have to be present when the baby is born. Too many times our genealogical searches are patrilineally determined. We search for the father and forget that the mother may be the key to where the records are located. Granted, following matrilineal lines may be more difficult, but you ignore them at your peril. It is much easier to follow the patrilineal lines, but in many cases little or no effort has been made to identify the women or complete the family groups. Before you get started doing genealogical research or searching for your ancestors and relatives, perhaps you should take a reality check. Genealogy should be consistent with reality, or at least the reality of historical records. This, of course, assumes your reality is consistent with reality. My idea here is that genealogy is history, and you need to have some idea of history to make sense of genealogical research. It also means that you should make sure that your genealogical conclusions are based on the geography and history of the places where events in your ancestors' lives took place. Because genealogy is history, you need to first learn something about the history of the places your ancestors lived. This means more than a basic study of the history of the country where they lived. It includes learning about the basic history of the towns and villages where your ancestors were born, lived, and died. Rule 1 is really a statement about where records are located. It highlights the fact that records are created at the place where an event occurs. But you might want to also wait for Rule 6. That addresses the fact that records move from one place to another. To understand Rule 1, you must be aware of jurisdictions. Jurisdictions determine where certain types of records are created and stored. Jurisdictions can also be based upon political subdivisions, social differences, religious organizations, and other related considerations. Examples of jurisdictions might be a country, state, or province, a school district, a parish, or a court district. This rule does not mean that you focus on birth events. It is more a general statement that researching genealogical records is fundamentally geographical in nature. MyHeritage is one of the largest genealogy databases and family tree websites. The MyHeritage science team, after a huge study of millions of family trees, published their findings in the prestigious journal Science. They found that before 1750, most Americans found a spouse within 6 miles of their birthplace. But for those born in 1950, the distance had increased or stretched out to 60 miles. Before 1850, marrying in the family was common. On average, 4th cousins married each other, compared to 7th cousins today. Curiously, they found that between 1800 and 1850, people traveled further than ever to find a mate, nearly 12 miles on the average, but were more likely to marry a fourth cousin or closer. This study indicates that as genealogists or family historians, we should be very aware of the location of all the events in our ancestors' or relatives' lives. If we find the name of a potential child in a family, we need to make sure that the events in that person's life correspond and match those of other family members. The most important of these correspondences is the location of the events. Always check the distance between the different places you find in records, and remember the general findings on distances people traveled to get married. Moving from place to place was considerably more complicated and time-consuming than it is today. Consider the time it took for people to travel from one place to another, especially before the start of the Industrial Revolution's impact on transportation. For example, did you know that the first modern railroad opened in 1830 in England? Focusing on the location of the events will help you avoid going off on the wrong ancestral line, and will also help you avoid wrongly adding children from one or more families into the same family. Remember, the first rule of genealogy is, when the baby was born, the mother was there. This concludes some of the basic ideas of the first rule of genealogy. There are 13 more rules of genealogical research. In between all my other activities, I'll be posting additional short videos highlighting each rule.